Hey folks, thanks for tuning in. One of the things we talked about was interviewing some of the folks that are stepping up to help lead in governance and managing, keeping a successful Orange County. And we're very fortunate today to have the opportunity to chat with Mr. Higginbotham, specifically Paige Higginbotham. Now, did I pronounce that Higginbotham? Did I get that correct?
You got it right. Not two T's, T-H-A-M, Higginbotham.
Botham.
You got it.
Very interesting name. And if any of you, unless you've been living under a rock for 150 years, you should probably know that you've got some big boots to fill.
Well, we've been around here for a little while. My family's actually from Amherst County, which is south.
Amherst, not Amherst.
No, that's right.
Amherst
is the college.
Right.
Amherst is the county. Yeah.
There's no English tie in there.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And of course, Higginbotham is about as English as it gets, isn't it?
That too. Yeah. So we've been in Orange now for 4 generations.
Wow.
But around Virginia for a lot longer than that. So yeah. All my family is from Virginia. My mom's side of the family's been in Orange actually a lot longer than my dad's, but my granddad moved here back during the Great Depression, back in the early 30s, and
wow.
He was an attorney here for a long time. Then my dad partnered up with him, and I've been here after my dad. So we sort of just skip right on through the generations.
And as I recall, was it your dad? I guess I was talking to. He had gone over some of his historical collections, and we were going. Didn't you have the person responsible for supplying a war managed all the what are the quartermasters? Don't you know quartermaster?
So George Washington Higginbotham was in charge of a lot of the supplies during the War of 1812. I believe my dad's the expert, but I'm pretty sure that's.
But doesn't that excite you to know that you sort of come from that? I mean,
it's definitely
baked into you to be part of leadership.
It's definitely cool to have a long standing tie to Virginia, especially Central Virginia, and I do think that's something really interesting and maybe a little bit unique. Although there's a lot of folks here in Virginia that families' names have been around for a long time.
As I tell everyone, you can't swing a dead cat and not hit something incredibly historical, especially in Orange County.
Especially in Orange, yeah.
Yeah, it's like people say, well, we want to protect the historic land. I'm like, okay, we should probably raise every building and just let it go back to where it was, because every square inch of this county is historic.
Yeah, been here a long time.
So one of the things we had spoken about earlier was that, and it was kind of a surprise to me when I started digging into it. We're all busy. We go to work. We try to help the community get involved. Maybe we go to our churches. But a lot of people may not actually realize that the Commonwealth Attorney is a constitutional position.
Correct.
And so you are the person that collectively as citizenry, we elect to bring a voice for justice, or could you sort of to bring people that don't know why we even want to vote or bother?
So I'll start out with what the Commonwealth's Attorney does. So the Commonwealth's Attorney is not the Attorney General. It's not the county attorney. A lot of people just don't know what the title means. You're basically the prosecutor, the chief prosecutor for Orange County. So what that means is when law enforcement brings a case to be tried, the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office handles it for the Commonwealth, because as you probably know, it's not Paul Cook versus Paige Higginbotham on the criminal side of things. It's the Commonwealth of Virginia versus Paige Higginbotham. So the Commonwealth's Attorney is the one that represents the interests of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Virginia is not a state. We're technically a Commonwealth, so that's why you have Commonwealth's attorneys. Other places they have district attorneys or state's attorneys. But the Commonwealth's Attorney for Orange County is the chief prosecuting attorney for all the crimes that occur in Orange County. So
both misdemeanor and felony?
Misdemeanor, felony, whatever occurs in Orange County that is a state crime. Obviously, we don't do federal crimes. That's a different prosecutor altogether.
Sure.
But for state crimes,
and that's district, that would incorporate a few counties together, or?
So no, it's only in Orange County. Every county has their own prosecutor. So if you're in Culpeper County, there's a different prosecutor than if you're in Orange County and Madison County. So each one has its own, And if you do something that spans multiple counties, you can actually get charged in Orange, Madison, Green. If you run down Route 15, you can pick up 4 or 5 different counties.
Cat Harper Road, you can pick up plenty of them in less than a mile.
So the other point about what the Commonwealth's attorney does that I think a lot of people don't do, which is I think the question you're getting at, is what we're charged with doing is actually different. Right now, I'm a criminal defense attorney. I have one job within the bounds of ethics to represent my client and to try to get them the best possible outcome that I can. That's my job. I only have one duty basically to one person. The Commonwealth's attorney, on the other hand, has lots of different duties, but only one mission. So their duty is to represent, their basic duty is to do justice. That's the one thing. So their duty is not to always get the most time or to always do the thing that the police want them to do, or the thing that the victim wants them to do, or the thing that the defense attorney wants them to do. What they're supposed to do is the right thing. So a Commonwealth's attorney, if they figure out that this charge is not a charge that I can maintain, they're supposed to get rid of it. So if you have a charge that's questionable, you shouldn't pursue it. If you have, on the other hand, someone where you have a tough case that you might not think you can make, but it's an important case, maybe you fight it tooth and nail and maybe you lose, but you're supposed to do the right thing, and your duties are to the defendant, to the victim, and to the Commonwealth, and really to a different degree to the officers that bring the charges. So you have a lot of different roles to fill, but the basic concept is you do what's right. You do justice.
So are you at the crossroads between the law and reason to some degree?
Well, I mean, sure, you have
within the conscript of jurisprudence.
So what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to look at the law and then apply it to the facts, and that's basically you're supposed to convince the trier of fact of what happened, and so that's your job. You are an advocate. The trick is you have to make sure that you're doing the right thing, that you're doing justice, whether that means advocating for the maximum penalty. Certainly there's lots of times where that's appropriate, or advocating for some sort of leniency because there's lots of mitigation. It's someone young with no criminal history,
right.
And so you take all those things into account, and really your job is to try to come up with the right formulation, and no one gets it right 100% of the time, but it comes down to reason and judgment. I think you're right.
So, and it's interesting you touch on this point, because this is something that some of the folks that I've spoken to is kind of like the question of, if you're done a wrong, justice is blind, and the facts. But those who have been harmed by crime, families that have been damaged by drug dealers, somebody driving down a road on their third DUI kills a family. These egregious crimes with lots of victims. How do you sort of navigate? I guess what my question is, if you get elected, what's your thoughts on what are the crimes that you're going to be looking to press forward with, full speed ahead when damage and the citizens of the county have been harmed?
Well, so those are, you set it up right. Those are the crimes that matter the most, or the ones where someone is injured or someone loses their property. I think certainly violent crimes are the number one priority.
That's important to you.
When someone hits someone else with their fist or their car when they're drunk driving, when someone injures someone else, that has to be a top priority. Anytime there's violence in the community, your job as the Commonwealth's attorney is to protect the community from harm.
Take that threat off the street.
Right. So if somebody continues to offend, like I say, you might want to be lenient with someone who is a juvenile and who has no criminal record and made some sort of terrible error in judgment. At the same time, someone that has continually had been involved with the legal system since they were a child,
right, and
has continued to commit heinous crimes, either because they have some form of addiction or because they are, they're just not a nice person. They just decided to not do the right thing.
They don't care.
Right. They either don't care or they're just malicious. Some
Oh,
people
yeah.
are just mean.
Some people are mean. Yeah. And I imagine you being on the other side as a defender, you've seen the ugly truth.
Sure. There's lots of people out there that they don't have a lot to recommend them. Now, on my side of things, I always try to find that kernel of humanity. Everyone, you know, my dad always said everyone deserves a fair deal. I mean, I think that's true, but I think there's a lot of variations on what is a fair deal. A fair deal to, you know, a third time someone convicted of a third distribution of drugs is different than someone on their first petty larceny that, you know, took a bag of chips from the 7-Eleven.
Right. Now, do you see gateways here? So, for example, somebody gets arrested for marijuana, and that's a real weird thing now. It's a controlled substance. It's not a controlled substance. Everybody, you know, there's a real kind of push lately to decriminalize as many things as possible, and yet a lot of these are contributory to problems down the line. Do you see where there's an arc to sort of monitor these? I mean, what you're thinking about when you say they have a pattern of problems?
So we definitely see that. We see a lot of the same names over and over. And a lot of times, to be honest with you, what I see is substance abuse and mental health issues underlie a lot of crime. I don't think it's an excuse, but I do think that it is where the rubber hits the road, right? A common denominator in a lot of crimes are untreated mental illness, and also the use of any sort of illegal substance. And a lot of times they go together, because people that have untreated mental illness, some severe, some sort of subacute, what you end up with are people that are self-medicating, you know. And the other thing that we see, unfortunately, one of the saddest things that we see is that drug addiction and alcohol addiction and even violence runs in families. Right. And so getting in early and trying to divert kids and keep them out of the system, that's something that I think is really important. Now,
are you involved with minors? So you mentioned the school systems.
Yeah.
So if we have some issues with, because I know that, like, as a parent who raised kids in school, there were some issues that popped up with my daughter that the school never informed us, and I don't want to throw you under the bus on the notification, but we found out later in therapy something that had happened to my daughter in school that nobody told us. We were out of the loop, and I don't know how to
so specific school policies. I don't. To be honest with you, I don't know the school policies well enough to.
But this is something you would sort of kind of increase your awareness.
I do think it's important if you've got issues in the schools. That's one of the reasons that I think it's important to work with the school resource officers closely.
Sure.
I've always thought that, you know, they're basically deputies, and most of them either are or were or
is that your conduit for information and awareness?
Yeah, I mean, I think the school. I mean, I'll work with the administration for sure and for certain. But a lot of the times, the way that the Commonwealth's attorney is going to hear about potential crime is through the school resource officer coming in and saying, you know, hey, look, you know, Johnny brought a knife to school. Right. Now, you know, there's Johnny's about to get in a fight with somebody, so he brought a knife. Or there's Johnny works with his dad in the carpet shop and always carries, or works on the farm.
He works on the farm. So I ran into that with my daughter of all people.
Right. And so that's just the discretion that you have to have.
Okay.
But I do think, you know, there's lots of mandatory reporting statutes.
Okay.
You know,
Good. All right.
If someone, you know, sees,
now where does that information collect?
So I really, it's supposed to be reported to the Commonwealth's attorney or to law enforcement. I mean, either way, I think you can go directly.
Is it appropriate for a parent with concerns through the chain of command, if they have a problem and it hasn't really, it's kind of null processed on the sheriff's department, and the parent's going, you know, how do I get voice or agency in this? Is there a Is there a chain? Is it just reporting to law enforcement,
No,
or is there?
I do. I think lots of people do go directly to the Commonwealth's attorney.
See, I never knew this.
I think that lots of times Commonwealth's attorneys will appropriately refer them to the people that are going to do the investigation.
But they would field a question through the office.
They do.
Okay.
And I mean, any office.
And I don't think a lot of people realize that.
I think that any Commonwealth's attorney's office would feel that they get a lot of calls from citizens with problems of some sort of legal part, there's a legal question that they need help with, and a lot of times they can't answer it
Right.
because it's not the appropriate venue. But if it is something criminal, then they should recognize it and point the person to the right direction, or say, okay, we're going to take this over and we're going to investigate it ourselves, because you can sort of do that. They have the ability to do their own investigation, but more often than not, what they usually do is refer it to the appropriate, town police or state police,
Right.
or,
So if nothing else, it's another resource for people to find justice at the end.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office is the place where prosecutions sort of begin and end.
Now, drug court.
Yeah.
A lot of people are not aware of even what that means, and I guess is drug court something that is available to minors, or is it something that's kind of spreads the gap?
So drug court is a new program
Okay.
to Orange and to a lot of different localities. So
How long has it been around? Roughly?
I would say
Couple years, 5 years?
It's been up and running now for probably about a year and a half, maybe 2 years.
And it goes in the regular courthouse like
It
anything
does.
else?
So Orange and Madison sort of share
Okay.
a judge, and so we share some of the same drug court personnel, and we also share resources.
So drug court tends to lean into a specific judge?
So basically, back up just a second. Drug
Okay.
court is a program. It's kind of a specialty docket. That's what they call it.
Okay.
And there's a bunch of different specialty dockets. They have mental health dockets. They have
In
veterans
drug
dockets.
court? Or these are different?
These
Okay.
are ones that are available in different parts of the state, largely
Are
jurisdictions
they
that
trying
have
to
bigger.
triage these problems with a little more specific skill set?
So they are, and so what they're trying to do is more intractable problems, ones that are difficult to deal with, like people with mental health issues. Some places have the money and time to have a mental health docket because it's more efficient than trying to run someone that has real issues with competency through the court system. It just causes lots of problems because they come in, they're competent, they come in, the next time they're incompetent and they're getting evaluated and you can't get them to court because they're being treated. But we really, fortunately, because we're small, we don't have those issues are not as acute as they would be in a big city where you have just there's a lot more population.
So where does that populate from? In other words, if something's good, somebody has to be charged.
So if you're talking about drug court,
right, or mental health court,
so we don't have here mental health court or veterans court because you actually have to have authorization. They have to be approved by the Supreme Court. You have to actually set them up, and it's not sort of an ad hoc thing. It's an official process, and Orange went through the whole process of getting it set up, and I will give it to Ms. O'Connell and the folks in Orange and the folks in the clerk's office and the judges. They have worked really hard to get this program up and running. And what it's supposed to do is provide an alternate route for people dealing with addiction, because what we find is over time that the same people keep popping up. We talked about that briefly, and the same people go into jail, and then they come out with the same addiction they had when they went in, and they recidivate at very high rates and very quickly. Sometimes it's a matter of days or hours even from when they're released to when they're picked back up where they overdose. And with the fentanyl problems, we're having people that just die, and that's a big problem. So what they said is, rather than just circulating these people through the system, and in the meantime, when they're waiting, because trial in circuit court takes a long time, it might take a year, it might take a year and a half, sometimes even 2 years to get a trial from the beginning in district court all the way through to sentencing at the end. That whole time, that person is basically just out on bond or held, and either way they're not getting
and these cases, these files are on your desk then as Commonwealth attorney?
Right, so when someone comes in, usually by the time they get to circuit court, the attorney might ask, hey, I think this person's a good candidate for drug court, or the Commonwealth can sort of on their own say, hey, that person might be a good candidate for drug court, or the judge can say, have you all considered drug court? Because this person, this is the third time I've seen them in the last 2 years for simple possession of heroin.
This sounds like a proactive process.
So it is, and the person then gets pulled out, they get sent in for an evaluation, and that evaluation says, look, do they have reasons they wouldn't be a good candidate, like they're violent, or do they have reasons that they have something in their past that would disqualify them, or can we bring them in and give them a much more proactive treatment? And the way it works,
this is adults and minors?
Mainly all adults at this point. There's lots of other tracks for minors. But you bring in an adult, they get evaluated, and then the way it works is they have lots and lots of interaction with the court. So they come in, they meet with the judge, they meet with their counsel, their attorney, but also with someone who's sort of keeping track of them, and they do it on initially a weekly basis, and then it can step down. So what happens is, if they come in and they've done what they're supposed to, they go right back out and they go on to their lives. It takes an hour or two out of their week. On the other hand, if they haven't, then they get some sort of sanction, and that might just be, look, we're going to continue to keep you coming in every week. The next time they might immediately go to jail. And that sort of immediacy is what they found is a more effective way to help people understand.
Sounds like they're trying to save lives.
Well, I think that's right. And that's the point is, if someone is intensely supervised and gets an immediate sanction as opposed to waiting a year and a half to go to prison for a year, if when they come off the wagon and they relapse, you're like, okay, you relapse, slap on the wrist the first time, second time you do a weekend or 10 days in jail. What you hope is that immediate consequence catches their attention.
Does this go on their record as a felony conviction when they relapse?
So it doesn't. That's the other.
So they can save themselves over a course of time.
And what you hope is, if they make it through the process, not only have they gotten a lot of valuable treatment, but potentially they have avoided a felony
They
conviction.
can go on to become a productive citizen of the county.
Right. That's what you hope is that the drug court will help them. And what they find is, even if they're not cured, because you don't really cure addiction, but what they find is that people that are successful in these sort of treatment programs will have much longer periods between their relapses. So if you're talking about someone coming out after a period of incarceration, and I'm talking days or hours before they use again, these people might go a year or two, or maybe 4 or 5, or maybe they just don't use anymore. That's a really big success, and it keeps the courts from being clogged up, and it saves lives.
It saves money too.
It does, because otherwise you're putting them in the Department of Corrections, and it costs a lot of money to keep them in there, especially knowing that when they get out, they're going to go right back to the same lifestyle.
And is the DUI process kind of a precursor, analogous to this, to where you go in, the judge says, okay, you're going to go to ASAP? I mean, does that still sort of follow its own track, or?
It is it's a different version. I think that's a little more traditional, where you have the first DUI, typically not jail, and then jail sort of ramps up from there, and eventually becoming felonies and having long periods of required incarceration. But there definitely is a treatment component, and I think that that's appropriate. I think that over the course of that year where you're being supervised by VASAP, you're supposed to get treatment, and it's not just VASAP. Lots of times they require Family Focus, who is the local counseling agency here, and lots of times people will have to do 10, 12, 15, 20 classes to successfully complete VASAP. So they do get that counseling. It's just a matter of whether they'll take advantage of it.
So shifting gears, there's a lot of conversation with a lot of people about property rights.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose the first question is, well, what is the landscape of property rights? Did somebody inadvertently wander off their property line? Somebody picking flowers on the side of the road, and there's a zero tolerance to trespass? Somebody hunting and shooting deer? I mean, what is the sort of the landscape of of when property rights becomes problematic. You know, there's people that metal detect and sneak out at night. I mean, there's a lot of.
So the law school answer is, a broken blade of grass is a trespass.
A broken blade of grass.
So when you go out and you step onto someone's property,
that's
a de minimis trespass is still a trespass.
Ah, okay.
So
and then is that at the property owner's discretion to prosecute, or?
Yeah, I mean, you always have discretion. I mean,
sure.
You certainly want someone to intentionally. If there's a crime, there should be intent for the most part. I mean, obviously there's some crimes where intent doesn't matter, but for the most part, if you step back onto the neighbor's lawn to catch a baseball that your kid threw over your head, you shouldn't get charged with trespassing.
You knock on the door to campaign for Hey Higginbotham.
Sure. I mean, unless there's a no trespass sign that you just walk past, I mean, then you're kind of at your own risk.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, property rights are important. We see a lot of it. A lot of times.
Is that a busy docket?
Well, it's not a separate docket. I mean, there's civil side.
Probably misused that term, but is it on the docket much?
So yeah, it is neighbors versus neighbors. Usually arguing over property lines. I know that's something you. With James Luther.
Shout out to James Luther out there. Yeah, that's not uncommon.
And it's usually neighbors that
it's grumpy too
that have a dispute over a property line, and so some of that can become criminal. For a lot of it, it's actually civil. Determining a property line is really a civil thing. But what happens is that civil determination causes people to get angry,
lose temper, and then
fight, and throw
at that
things
point
at
it's
the neighbors.
Assault
And that's what you hope to avoid, is that when something comes in like that, you hope that you can use your good discretion to encourage those people to part ways and not do that.
So don't stalk your neighbor, or they're going to have a visit with the Commonwealth attorney.
Right. Well, the cops show up, and what usually happens is the cops get really frustrated because they go out there 5 times.
They're wasting resources.
And they have to, and all these people are doing is bickering over property line.
Right.
It's important, but then usually someone says or does or touches someone else, and then you have a.
What I've seen with what I've done with my guy is that basically mark the property lines with a professional surveyor, and it's like, sorry, here's the truth, moving on.
Right, and that's very helpful. And those cases, they still come up. You hear people talk about spike fences and people putting up fences, with flags and signs. I mean, it happens all the time. You really hope that you can figure out a way to work those things out so that people don't end up with criminal convictions out of things that really are just people not being.
And that's kind of it. Would be property disputes on property rights. Are there any other issues?
So I mean, I think in general the law is pretty clear on that.
Okay.
You certainly prosecute it if it needs to be prosecuted. But what you hope is that people will be neighborly, and that there are alternative ways around it. Certainly we see that people use protective orders. If someone threatens you over, well, you can't do that, and they say, oh yeah, I can, and they threaten you.
File that with the court.
You can go into the clerk's office. You can get a for an act of violence, force, or threat. You can get a protective order, and then the judge will say, well, you can't be within 300 feet of that person's
And if
property.
they violate, then that comes to you.
Then that's a crime. Okay, so a protective order is just a civil proceeding where you can use that to try to prevent someone from contacting you in the future if they've done something that is an act of violence, force, or threat. But the violation, that is a crime, and that's where you just hope that people use that correctly. Sometimes from the defense standpoint, we see people using protective orders as more of a sword than a shield.
As a right, and in that situation, that's on the record moving forward. And
well, you certainly hope that people are smart enough to kind of see their way around it. We've got some very good judges here.
Oh, good.
I think that the judges here are very aware of how that works.
They're going to sniff it out, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't always work out the right way, but in general, I have a lot of confidence in our local judges that they get to the bottom of things like that.
And how many judges do we have in circulation here in Orange that are consistently not, and are there guest judges that can?
So we have 3 courts in Orange. We have
Okay.
General District Court, which is your basic misdemeanors and traffic violations.
Okay.
You have, and there's 1 judge for that. And then you have the Juvenile Domestic Relations Court, which handles either juveniles or matters between members of the family, brother, sister, mom, dad, siblings.
Juvie court, right?
Yeah. And it handles all of that stuff. And then you have the Circuit Court, which handles all the serious felonies and misdemeanors on appeal. So we have 3 judges that sit regularly in Orange. The district court meets twice a week, depending on kind of where they are with things. The Juvenile Domestic Relations Court meets 3 or 4 days a week. I believe they may be up to 5. And the Circuit Court is usually 3 to 4 days a week. So we have 3 judges here in Orange County at the courthouse.
So looking down the road, Paige Higginbotham wins the election for Commonwealth Attorney. What's your Christmas list of the things that you would like to see either improved or expanded or changed? I mean, what are the changes that you can bring, or should I say specific? Where would you focus?
Right.
What are the things you think are missing, and what do you bring to the citizens? Make the case why they should vote for you.
So the first thing is just simple administrative stuff. It's not exciting.
Nuts and bolts.
It's not exciting, but nuts and bolts. Making sure that when you go to court that you're prepared. If you tell the defense attorney that you're going to have a plea agreement, that it's ready. If you show up for something that you filed the certificate of analysis, that you filed your discovery appropriately, there's rules that govern what you owe.
They have to disclose what they know
right.
to the
At a
defense
certain
attorney.
time. It's all
So
by
that's been
statute.
bumpy?
It's all by statute. And yeah, in my experience, that's just not always getting done. In fact, a lot of times it's not getting done, and that causes problems, because what happens is, if you don't have a case going forward, it gets continued into another slot 30 days out. And when you do that a number of times, or with the same case a number of times, things start to come unravel. You stack things together, or you forget something else, and it just causes a sort of snowballing. The dockets grow.
Comedy of errors.
And it does.
Yeah.
And so the first priority is to make sure that the sort of nuts and bolts, the blocking and tackling, as my former partner would say, you have to get that stuff right. And if you do that, then a lot of the other stuff tends to sort of work itself out.
Success perpetuates more success.
Right, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
So that would be sort of the number 1 thing, just the boring day to day.
Become more effective.
Become
as an
efficient
office. Yeah.
and effective, and
Okay.
make sure that people get what they're owed. The second thing is that
So that's going to service the legal community by and large to make the system work more
it
effectively.
does, and it also services. I mean, it's not just for attorneys. What happens is, if you're always continuing a case, it's inconvenient for the jurors that have been summoned and then released.
Oh, yeah.
It's inconvenient for the victim, who may be held in jail. It's inconvenient. I mean, not for the victim. I'm sorry. It's inconvenient for the defendant, who may be held
Right.
in jail.
Who
It's
took off
inconvenient-
from work to be there.
It's inconvenient for the defendant, who may be held in jail. You've got someone, and if you're not prepared, they go back to jail. Well, maybe they deserve to be in jail, but they haven't been found guilty yet. So,
Right.
you don't want to just have cases linger. So that's important. The other big one is restoring our relationship between the prosecutors of the Commonwealth Attorney's Office and law enforcement. They are separate entities, and I'm not saying that they should work at the same rate, pace, time, with the same ideas, but they have to work together.
They're both on the same mission.
Well, they are. I mean, they bring the facts in,
You would hope.
and then you prosecute them, but you need them to come along with you, because they're your witnesses. They're the people that have done the investigations, and you better hope that they're on your side, and that they're involved, and that they feel like they haven't been shortchanged. It's never going to be perfect.
Right.
Nothing is. But they better know that their work is valued, and that you really care about what they do. Same thing goes for the victims. It's really important that the victims of crimes know that they're heard. There were some changes to the law this year that says that you have to consult with the victims of crimes before entering into a plea deal. I'd like to think that we'll do that. You're not always going to be able to give them what they want. Sometimes that's just not in the cards.
Because if everybody's a little unhappy, you've done your job.
Well, I mean, that's the way compromise works.
Yeah.
But sometimes you're just going to tell them that there's nothing that can be done. And that's a tough conversation, but it's one you have to have, because if you don't have the conversation, then people are rightly angry. They feel like you've done something, you won't bring a charge. And if you sit them in your office and say, I can't bring this charge because X, because there is no evidence, or because the witness is not credible, or for whatever reason.
Those are hard pills to swallow, but sometimes that's the lay of the land.
That's what you have. That's what you have to tell people.
So I'm getting from you, you're going to have the courage to call balls and strikes at the front end of these problems.
I mean, you have to, and if you don't, then things just sort of snowball. You don't have to be confrontational, but you do have to make sure that you tell people what it is that you're going to do. They deserve that.
So, one of the things, you may have detractors, obviously, because we have two different sides of the, it's an election.
Yep.
You've got people on both sides. I will say that it seems to me like the decorum of the Commonwealth's race has been pretty good. The other races are a little pulling up the sleeves, but not knowing what your detractors would say, are there any sort of points that you would want to make that sort of speak to your detractors? Maybe some sort of mischaracterizations?
Well, the one thing that I keep hearing that I think is interesting is some people keep saying, well, he had 3 jobs in 3 years.
Right.
And I keep seeing that kicked around. And I mean, I guess technically that's true. I left a firm where I was an associate attorney to become a partner at a firm where I worked with one of the best attorneys in Orange.
Sounds like a promotion.
Yeah, it was. So I went from...
Well, how dare you get a promotion?
Right. So I went, I went from working at Bowman and Harper to working at, Thomas, Watson, and Higginbotham, put my name on the door. So that's a good move. And I still continued to do my criminal work at about 50% of what I had done previously. I did about 50% civil work. So I learned some stuff about, about civil, about wills and estates, about real estate, what would you do?
That stuff gets pretty deep, doesn't it?
It does.
And language and there's a lot. What is it? It's dense.
It is very dense.
Yeah.
And I like doing it, but after 2 years, I decided that I missed doing criminal stuff full time.
Sure.
I had talked to Frank. We had the third partner had left, and we were trying to decide what to do. And I had an opportunity to come back to the office where my dad and my granddad worked, and open a new partnership where I would be an equity partner, an owner, own my own firm. Something I've always wanted to do. So within the 3-year period, I went from associate to partner to owning my own firm.
So this sounds like a natural arc of moving forward.
It is. I'm very proud of it, and that's what I think is kind of strange, is that people are saying, oh, well, what's he been doing? Well, I've been sort of moving up quickly. The other thing I'd say that I think is important is I never really switched jobs. I've done criminal work my entire legal career, and I continue to do it. I mean, I may have gone from doing 350 or 400 criminal cases a year down to 150 or 200, but I've never.
That's still a lot of work.
I've never stepped away from it.
Yeah.
I still love doing it. I tried something else to see, do you want to be a civil attorney? No, I like it. It's interesting, but I like doing criminal work. I like trial work too. And
I imagine it's the difference between riding a horse through the woods and sitting in an office when you're doing civil. There's a lot. It moves fast, doesn't it?
Well, so criminal stuff, at least on the defense side of things, in a rural community, you travel a lot.
Yeah.
You get out.
Okay.
So
literally.
Yeah, you do. So you go to a lot of different jurisdictions. That would be
Okay.
one of the differences with being elected as Commonwealth's attorney, is I would be in one place all the time. But I think that's something that's appropriate given my sort of place in life. I've got kids, a
Sure.
wife. I'm settled in Orange. On the farm here. Don't have plans to go anywhere.
I feel better every time I come back into Orange County, so I understand the appeal that you
Yeah.
speak to.
So that would be
It's a wonderful place.
That would be the big thing. I mean, there's folks that are talking about experience. I will never have the same experience at this point in my life that she does, that Diana does, for having been there 20 years. But what I will say to that is, you can at a certain point maybe lose the sort of focus, that acute focus on what it is your job is supposed to be. And I kind of think that's where having new sort of fresh take on things could be an improvement.
Yeah, the term I use is sometimes the old Model A needs a tune-up.
Right. Well,
And it's not to say it's bad, but sometimes fresh eyes solve fresh problems.
Well, I mean, and that's what I offer is a
Good.
fresh start, something new, someone who's motivated to try to get things.
The excitement.
Yeah, get it right. So that's the take on those two things.
So your parting words are vote for me.
Yeah, vote for Paige Higginbotham. The election is November the 7th. Please get out there and vote. Early voting starts September 22nd, so that's new, and I'd encourage everybody to get out there and try to do that. I'd really appreciate your vote. If you have questions, please reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to you.
Yeah, I always use the old joke, vote now, vote often.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you so much for your
Thank
time.
you. I
Appreciate
really
it.
appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.